Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Star Wars Expanded Universe, now dubbed by Disney, or on Lucasfilm, whichever way you slice it, Legends. I have a reread for you, but before we get to that, I have a few other things to mention. Starting with Galaxy Guide number 5. This is basically just Return of the Jedi. There are a couple shorts that you could read here. Again, not necessary in the slightest, but they are here if you wanted. You have Employment Test, The Pit of Carcoon, Gambler's Run, Ewok Defenses, Briefing of Red Group, Night Attack, and Imperial Scouting Party. These are all just a bunch of little shorts. Ewok Defenses is from the perspective of the Ewoks. Imperial Scouting Party is about an Imperial who recognizes that the Ewoks could be a threat, but everybody ignores him. Gambler's Run has to do with Lando and Nia Nub. Pit of Carcoon, of course, has to do with the Pit of Carcoon. And yeah, it's just a little things, that would take place around Return of the Jedi that you can read. Then we also return to something that I have not talked about in a long, long time, which is Star Wars Visionaries, which had like 12 little shorts within it. I talked about All Wounds way back when. I talked about The Artist and all that, the Grievous short. But Entrenched is the short story in this comic today. And we follow this rebel who was at the Battle of Hoth, all the way back in episode 5, who does not make it off Hoth. But it does show the kind of, how he survived Yavin, went on to Hoth, and then died at the, not hands, I guess, but the force choke of Darth Vader. Now, that is all well and decent. The reason I think the story works is because of what you learn at the end. It leads right up to this scene with Mon Mothma, giving the briefing in episode 6. But we learn that this person that we've been following for this comic is Mon Mothma's child. And because the Empire took over the Hoth base when they were all getting away, she did not get it for 6 months. She had no idea if her son was alive or not for half a year. And she only got confirmation right before she gave the debriefing. So it just adds a little bit more to Mon Mothma. Lastly, before we get to the thing I'm talking about today, we have the Truce at Bakura source book, The Deposition of General Solo. And that's another thing. Han Solo is basically going to be a general for a good portion moving forward until he stops being one. But for a good while, he's going to be a general. Again, character development, right? Like scoundrel to general, and eventually father and husband. He's not there yet, but still, progression. I guess that's all I'll say there. I'm not going to harp on canon or otherwise. I have today to talk about, for a second time, with, more of a seasoned veteran EU enjoyer perspective, The Truce at Bakura. I know it's backwards for you, by Kathy Tyers. I love Kathy Tyers, and I love this book. Would I recommend this as a starting point over the Thrawn trilogy? Yes and no. I think the Thrawn trilogy really feels like a sequel to the movies, but at the same time, this takes place literally a day after. I mean, it goes over like weeks and stuff, but it starts a day after the Battle of Endor. So what better place to start if you wanted to get into the EU than starting with a book that starts off right after something you're really familiar with? The Truce at Bakura mostly deals with the Bakuran system. See, it's a day after Endor. Emperor Palpatine is dead. Darth Vader is dead. But the galaxy is vast. The galaxy is expansive. Not everyone is going to know right away that the Emperor and Darth Vader have died. Hell, when the Empire took over, it took years for everyone to fully know what had happened, that the Empire is now in control. So in the same sense, many places still do not yet know. This book also does something interesting, as we do have some of those stereotypical evil Imperials, right? But that's alongside something fresh, something new. All we've seen for the original trilogy is Imperials bad, Imperials bad, Imperials bad, and Jabba the Hutt. We get to see a new alien race. They are the threat this time, the Sissy Rook. This is also where we get into the Marvel Cinematic Universe phase of things. And what I mean by that, as opposed to stuff in the prequels and whatnot, I mean, you had connections, but this is where things really start to come into fruition. Like, everything you see moving forward will be referenced or involve characters that you see elsewhere moving forward. It's very much like the phase one of the post Endor stories. You'll have stories that are one-offs until those elements get brought up again in some other story. So you have those connections. But the Sissy Rook are an interesting faction. They basically, to describe them, they're kind of like sentient velociraptors. They look a bit different than that, but that's the general gist of what you're trying to look at there. And they have this attachment thing, or they have this kind of like paddle ball, sort of like, think like ping pong, or like in the pool when you clean up leaves and stuff from your pool, use this thing. It's kind of like that. Imagine something similar to that, and it is a little weird. You have to kind of accept the weirdness. They can take like a force essence, a soul, and trap it into a robot or droid, and they want to do that to all of the galaxy. They want to rule with a bunch of robot minions that have human souls within them, essentially. We get introduced to this kid named Dev, whose mother is apparently a force sensitive. If not even, it might even go further as to be a Jedi that went into hiding, because the way he talks about her seems to be like she was, and that she might have trained him had he gotten older, but then she died by the Sissy Rook. And then the Sissy Rook take Dev under, their care, and he goes being like this prophet, speaking about, the greatness of the attachment, how once you join a droid body, you can be free of pain, free of fear of all this, because you won't have those emotions anymore once you're in that state. But the Sissy Rook mostly just want an army. They could care less about your happiness or whatever. They don't really care. And Dev is sort of a tragic character, because as you continue to read the story, you learn that maybe his devotion to these creatures are not as genuine as you were led to believe, without getting into spoilers. We also just have some great character development outside of the main plot, because that is essentially the main plot. The Rebel Alliance, a day after, they get a distress call from the Empire, from the Bakuran system, because it's kind of out in the backwaters of space. They have no knowledge that the Emperor is dead, right? And all the Imperial forces that were at Endor have kind of bolted out to kind of recoup their losses. So no one is nearby to help them. The Sissy Rook are attacking the Bakuran people, and if the Rebel Alliance does not help, they will probably perish. And so they think of this as a way to perhaps start peace, one system at a time. And so, of course, Leia, Han, Luke, Chewie, the droids, Wedge, and Tilly's, they go out to try to broker this peace by helping them with this alien threat. Of course, Not every Imperial is going to be happy with that. Some may be more susceptible to making peace, but that's a very fragile thing, and it's a very complicated thing, because as far as the Bakuran people are aware, literally a day ago, the Empire was reigning supreme. So that's a whole lot of things going on, but that's essentially the main gist of the plot. Um, there's also a lot of good character things in here. Luke is suffering from the electrocution that was put upon him by the Emperor. He's still recovering from that. He hasn't had time to go into Bacta. He is a commander in the Rebel Alliance. He doesn't really have time to rest, and the Rebel leaders want him to stay out of this mission, but Obi-Wan Kenobi, who's still a Force ghost at this point, is telling him you need to go there, and he gets no further talks from Ben outside of that. So he goes. This is also another time that Luke, we've seen this a few times in the comics now, he gets a love interest of sorts. They don't actually develop into a relationship, but you can clearly tell there are feelings there, and I think that's okay. I think it works a bit better than Callista, though I'm not a Callista hater like some people are. We'll talk about Callista down the line. But Garielle, I think is how you say her name, she was a very good character. And she has an interesting philosophy as well, or she starts with it with the Jedi. It's sort of this religion. It's sort of this Full Metal Alchemist concept. For those of you who don't know what that is, that's an anime. The idea in the anime is that you can basically do magical things. You can create a radio or something. You can create a staff to attack something with, or you can do that, but it's an equal exchange. So for whatever you ask for, something else must be equivalently exchanged. In the same sort of sense with her view, she doesn't like Jedi because she views it as if they're using all this power in the universe, then somebody else must pay the price elsewhere in the universe. So it's an interesting perspective. Leia is also dealing with a lot in this book, because she never really got to process the information that was given to her. First, Luke tells her that Vader is his father, and then he tells her, "I am your brother," which means Vader is her father. And so in this book, we really get to see her deal with that. And while she kind of makes amends by the end of this book, there's still a grudge being held up until Tatooine's Ghost by Troy Denning, which was made during the Del Rey era, but we will get to that. But um, uh, everything involving her and Anakin Skywalker was absolutely phenomenal. And I'm sure I'm going to upset some people who really love the OT, but I most definitely imagined Hayden Christensen, and it was wonderful to imagine Hayden getting the chance to talk to Leia Organa. It's just wonderful. Like imagining him being able to talk to Carrie Fisher at that age was a lot of fun. Han, there's not too much with Han in this book in terms of development. He is the great guy that he's become by the end of episode 6. There is more development with him to come. He is part of the Alliance. He is now a general. That's about the rank as a development, but as for character, he's kind of had his complete arc. But there is more for him to grow, as we'll see down the line. But and then C-3PO and R2-D2 are they're themselves, and so same with Chewbacca. This is where we start to see, and you'll start seeing this be a trend. Admiral Akbar becomes more of a character. He was kind of around in episode 6, but he's not really a character. He gets quite a bit of talking scenes early on in the book, and as we continue to progress through the Bantam era, we shall see more of him, which I think is wonderful, and he becomes one of my favorite characters post Return of the Jedi. I love Akbar. He's just, a solid dude. Akbar is the type of character, as we'll see moving forward, who really despises politics, tries to stay out of it as best he can, and really prefers, commanding his troops and doesn't see them as pawns. Every person, every loss matters to him. And there's just something to be said about that with military characters like that in fiction. You see a lot of that in the Halo too. But he's one of the OGs. But yeah. Also, the thing with Dev is, he's force sensitive, as you see throughout the book. So, potential student for Luke, except that this was made after the Thrawn trilogy. And already, they're trying to conform to that trilogy. They're trying to remain in continuity because that's what the EU writers did. So, if Luke was to have a student by this point, um, even if Dev survived this book, he would have to die at some point or go away because Luke doesn't have any students by the time of the Thrawn trilogy. The only student he really has is Leia. So what happens to Dev? Well, you have to read the book to find out. But overall, I think this is a really fun read, a really good starting point for getting into your post-movie era. If you are disappointed with the sequels, I'm not trying to start hate. If you enjoy them, God bless your heart. I'm so glad you enjoy them. If you enjoy them but still want to know the other story, the other timeline, you might say, this is a good place to start. Because it only requires you to really know the movies. You could read this book having finished episode 6 and have a good time. Overall, though, I think I like this more than I did the first time I read it. I appreciate it more than I did the first time through. And as I've grown with these books, the appreciation just continues to grow. Anyway, guys, thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. Sharing helps out a ton. And join me as next time we discuss a comic, a short story, both of which involve Boba Fett, and then we have a trilogy, also focused on Boba Fett. Till then, guys, may the Force be with you. Actually, frick. That's for all the people that don't want spoilers. For the people that don't want spoilers, I'm sorry. I said everything. Actually, here's a little extra for those of you who stuck around past that. All right, listen. I only have one thing of note, which is page 194, where Luke and Leia are talking after Leia's talked to Anakin, which was, again, a phenomenal scene. I just want to do this. I'm going to start doing this every end of the episode, I think, just to piss off Noah. Quality Autism, another YouTuber. He likes to nitpick things that he doesn't like. So I'm gonna do the same, but for things that I do like. So Leia talks, or Luke talks about, possibly wanting kids in the future and the fear of, what they could become, with his power. And Leia says, yeah, but that's, the risk you take when you have kids, even if you don't have the Force, or something like that. I'm paraphrasing. Point is, foreshadow for the future. It all works in continuity. Ah ha 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 ha. Jason's fall makes sense. Frick you. That's it. I thought I had more notes than that, but I pretty much said everything without spoilers. So that's it. Anyway, truly this time, next time, until I see you guys, may the Force be with you.